Hare Krishna, welcome to today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Before we start Srimad Bhagavatam class, let's do a simple Mangala Charana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaim Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the only means of conquest, let us offer our respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayana, onto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, onto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and onto Srila Vyasadeva, the author of Srimad Bhagavatam. Nastaparesha Vdareshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavadi Naistikihi. By regularly attending Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering service onto the Lotus feet of pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely vanquished, and loving devotional service onto the Lotus feet of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs and choice poetry, is established in one's heart as an irrevocable fact. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Jnana Salakaya Chakshura Almanatanyana Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master illuminated my heart with the torch of transcendental knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Parestaya Bhutale Srimate Japataka Swami Iti Namine Nama Acharya Padanitai Kripa Padayane Gora Kadatam Dai Nirgram Thani. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome everyone to today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 18. Chapter entitled The Description of Varnasrama Dharma. Continuation from last week's class. So this week's class will be the continuation of last chapter, which was the description of brahmachari and brahmanas. So this chapter 18 will be the description by Lord Krishna on to Srila Uddhava on the ashrama of vanaprastha and sannyasa. So vanaprastha means the ashrama of retirement from family life, and sannyasa is the renounced order of life. For me, reading this chapter is a very mind-blowing experience, because this chapter demonstrates to us what is the level of surrender. We hear about this surrender all the time. Krishna says, Sarva Dharma Parityajya, surrender unto me, surrender unto me. So this chapter actually gives you a glimpse into what is the level of surrender, how much must you sacrifice in terms of surrender. So before we begin this chapter, I like to say two other things. This chapter you will hear things that are very difficult for us to understand. But we have to keep in mind that this process of self-realization, that is vanaprastha and sannyasa, must be done under the guidance and blessings of a spiritual master. The reason this is very important is because if it is not done under the guidance, expert guidance of a bonafied spiritual master, what will happen is what happened to Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj, he retired from family life, he left his kingdom, went to the forest with the intent to meditate upon the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. But in the end, what happened was he meditated upon a baby deer. So his next life, he was born as a deer. So there is danger in performing such a method of realization without the blessings of a bona fide spiritual master. That is the first thing. The second thing we have to keep in mind while listening to this chapter is that the ultimate goal for this process of realization is to come to the platform of bhakti yoga. This is the purpose behind this method of realization. So having these two thoughts in mind, let's now begin reading this chapter. Text number 1. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who desires to adopt the third order of life, vanaprastha, should enter the forest with a peaceful mind, leaving his wife with his mature son, or else taking her along with him. Text number 2. Having adopted the vanaprastha order of life, one should arrange one's sustenance by eating uncontaminated bulbs, roots and fruits that grow in the forest. One may dress oneself with tree bark, grass, leaves, or animal skin. Text number 3. The vanaprastha should not groom the hair on his head, body or face, should not manicure his nails, should not pass stool and urine at irregular time, and should not make a special endeavor for dental hygiene. He should be content to take bath in water 3 times daily and should sleep on the ground. Text number 4. Thus engaged as a vanaprastha, one should execute penance during the hottest summer days by subjecting oneself to burning fire on 4 sides and the blazing sun overhead. During the rainy season, one should remain outside, subjecting oneself to the torrents of rain, and in the freezing winter, one should remain submerged in water up to one's neck. So here, Krishna is giving very vivid description, introduction actually into what is vanaprastha life. But one should remember that this process is simply to prepare oneself to come to the platform of bhakti yoga. So this vanaprastha life is actually, one engages in this method actually to overcome the bad habit of sense gratification one has accumulated within one's life, and to counteract this sinful hedonistic activity. A devotee of the Lord naturally develops Krishna consciousness and need not subject himself to such a radical penance. There is a verse in Pancharatra, it goes like this: if one is worshipping the Lord properly, what is the use of severe penance? And if one is not properly worshipping the Lord, what is the use of severe penance? If Sri Krishna is realized within and without everything that exists, what is the use of severe penance? And if Sri Krishna is not seen within and without everything, then what is the use of severe penance? So here it's made very clear that the ultimate perfection of life is not to unduly go through all these different kind of severe penances. These severe penances actually to undo the bad habits of living a life of sense gratification. This sense gratification is the biggest obstacle to our advancement to our eternal life. So let's continue. Text number 5. One may eat foodstuff prepared with fire, such as grains or fruits ripened by time. One may grind one fruit with mortar and stone or with one's own teeth. Text number 6. The vanaprastha should personally collect whatever he requires for his bodily maintenance, carefully considering the time, place, and his own capacity. He should never collect provision for the future. So here, this regulation is actually meant to keep one fixed in faithful dependence on the Supreme Lord. If one collects food for keeping for the future, that is the indication of sense gratification and lust. Okay, unless one is completely incapacitated, one should not depend on others for one's personal maintenance, as this will create a debt that can only be repaid by taking another birth in the material world. This applies only to those endeavoring for personal purification and not for those engaged in full time in devotional service to Lord Krishna. A pure devotee eats, dresses, and speaks for the service of the Lord, and thus whatever assistance he accepts from others is not for himself. He is fully surrendered to the mission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, one not so surrendered will certainly have to take birth again in the material world to repay all his debts to others. So this is the glory of devotional service. Once you are practicing devotional service, pure devotional service, you surrender everything you do to Lord Krishna. From the very onset, you are surrendering to him already. So this extra effort of performing severe penances, all is not necessary. Text number 7. One who has accepted vanaprastha order of life should perform seasonal sacrifice by offering oblations of charu and sacrificial cakes prepared from rice and other grains found in the forest. The vanaprastha, however, may never offer animal sacrifice to me, even those sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas. Text number 8. The vanaprastha should perform the Agnihotra, Darsha and Purnamasa sacrifice as he did while in the Grihastha ashram. He should also perform the vow of sacrifice of Chaturmasya, since all these rituals are enjoined in the vanaprastha ashram by expert knower of the Vedas. So here Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has given a detailed explanation of the 4 rituals mentioned here, namely Agnihotra, Darsha, Purnamasa and Chaturmasya. The conclusion is that everyone should simply chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and avoid the difficult entanglement of Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. If one neither chants Hare Krishna nor performs such ritual, one certainly becomes a Pashandi or an atheistic fool. Text number 9. The saintly vanaprastha, practicing severe penance and accepting only the bare necessities of life, becomes so emaciated that he appears to be merely skin and bones. Thus, worshipping me through severe penance, he goes to Maharloka planet and then directly achieves me. So the vanaprastha who develops pure devotional service achieves the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna while in the vanaprastha state of life. One who does not become completely Krishna conscious, however, first goes to the planet Maharloka or Risaloka, and from there directly achieves Lord Krishna. Okay. On Maharloka planet, the unsuccessful stage is given more attention to chanting and hearing, and thus he gradually develops pure love of Godhead. So the lesson for us here is, why wait until go to Maharloka to practice hearing and chanting about the glories of Sri Krishna? Why not do it right now itself and solve the difficulty in the problem of going through all these difficult ritualistic ceremonies? Text number 10. One with long endeavor execute this painful but exalted penance, which awards ultimate liberation simply to achieve insignificant sense gratification, must be considered the greatest fool. So Krishna does not want this process to be abused or exploited by materialistic rascals, for the ultimate goal is actually love of Godhead. Text number 11. If the vanaprastha is overtaken by old age and because of his trembling body is no longer able to execute the prescribed duties, he should place the sacrificial fire within his heart by meditation, and then fixing his mind on me, he should enter into the fire and give up his body. So this is very, very serious. Although this may not be possible in the modern age, we can appreciate the absolute seriousness of going home back to Godhead as evidence in this verse. This is how much serious you must be. Text number 12. If the vanaprastha understands that even promotion to Brahmaloka is a miserable situation, develops complete detachment from all possible results of fruitive activities, then he may take the sannyas order of life. So now Krishna is going to speak a little bit about the renounced order of life, sannyas. What is sannyas? Text number 13. Having worshipped me according to scriptural injunctions and having given all one's property to the sacrificial priest, one should place the fire sacrifice within oneself. Thus, with the mind completely detached, one should enter the sannyas order of life. So sannyas order of life means to engage exclusively in devotional service for the Supreme Lord. One who achieves a beautiful state of Krishna consciousness takes the sannyas order of life, but if he does not vigilantly and painstakingly keep his heart clean, there is always the danger of relapse into illusion. What is illusion? Attachment to women, money and reputation. Text number 14. This man taking sannyas is going to surpass us and going back to Godhead. So this is the thinking process of those who are the devas. Thus thinking, the demigod creates stumbling block on the path of sannyasis by appearing before him in the shape of his former wife or other women and attractive objects. But the sannyasi should pay the demigods and their manifestation no heed. So Lord Krishna here is encouraging all sannyasis by telling them, pay no attention to such illusory manifestation. Continue your duty. Go back home, back to Godhead. Text number 15. If the sannyasi desires to wear something besides a mere kopin, he may use another cloth around his waist and hip to cover the kopin. Otherwise, if there is no emergency, he should not accept anything besides his danda and water pot. So a sannyasi appears to this sannyasi attracted to material possession will spoil his worship of Lord Krishna. So this is actually a advice by Lord Krishna that if a sannyasi still is attracted to material life, he should be as simple as possible, as austere as possible. Text number 16. A saintly person should step or place his foot on the ground only after verifying with his eyes that there are no living creatures such as insects who might be injured by his foot. He should drink water only after filtering it through a portion of his cloth, and he should speak only words that possess the purity of truth. Similarly, he should perform only these activities his mind has carefully ascertained to be pure. So a serious consideration, one can understand that any activity other than devotional service to Lord Krishna has no ultimate value. Therefore, one should exclusively engage in the purifying activities of Krishna consciousness. Text number 17. One who has not accepted the three internal disciplines of avoiding useless speech, avoiding useless activities, and controlling the life air can never be considered a sannyasi merely because of his carrying a bamboo rod. So here Krishna is talking about the bamboo rod. This bamboo rod is called a danda. It indicates severe discipline. Discipline, dedication of the body, mind and words to the service of the Supreme Lord. So the practice of regulating the life air is meant to control the mind. And one who always thinks of service to Lord Krishna has certainly achieved the perfection of pranayama. Text number 18. Rejecting those houses that are polluted and untouchable, one should approach without previous calculation even 7 houses, and be satisfied with what which is obtained there by begging. According to necessity, one may approach each of the 4 occupational orders of society. So the way sannyasis maintain themselves is by practicing called madhukari. So madhukari here is referring to the method in which bees collect honey from flowers. So bees, when they collect honey, what they do is they take a little bit of nectar from each flower. They don't take everything out of the flower. They take just a little bit from each flower, and like that they collect honey in the honeycomb. So sannyasis also, they are supposed to perform this kind of method of begging, whereby they are only allowed to beg from 7 houses in one day. In that 7 houses, if they collect what they require to survive for that day, they should be satisfied with them and they should eat that. Let's say if they were to go to only 7 houses in a day and they were to get nothing, no food come to them, so they should consider that day they are fasting. So the reason why sannyasis perform this kind of begging, which is very restrictive, is because begging actually, if any of us had any experience, you will see it's actually very, very good business. You actually give nothing and you get something 100% profit in return. So those who engage in begging professionally, they are entrapped by greed and lust. So for a sannyasi who has dedicated his life to Krishna, he must safeguard himself against this tendency to fall down into lust and greed, because this begging business is actually very, very good business. So it is not the sannyasi's business to make money from begging. His purpose for begging is simply to maintain his soul and body together so that he can perform devotional service onto the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. That's all, nothing else. Text number 19. Taking the food gathered through begging, one should leave the populated area and go to a reservoir of water in a secluded place. There, having taken a bath and washed one's hand thoroughly, one should distribute portions of the food to others who may request it. One should do this without speaking. Then, having thoroughly cleansed the remnants, one should eat everything on one's plate, leaving nothing for future consumption. So a saintly person should not argue or quarrel with materialistic persons who may request or demand part of his food. One should give something to such person to avoid disturbance, and then offering the remnants to Lord Vishnu, one should eat everything on one's plate without saving food for the future. One should eat silently, meditating upon the Lord's mercy. So we should remind ourselves, whenever we eat Krishna Prasad, we should remain silent and we should meditate on the mercy of Krishna giving us the opportunity to eat Krishna Prasad. I know this is very difficult for us to do because when we go to temple, when we sit down and eat, we want to open our mouth and yak. This is a very, very difficult habit to overcome. But this is what we must do. As devotees, we want to honor Prasad, we want to honor Krishna, we want to honor His mercy. This is what we must do. We must engage not only our tongue and our stomach, but also our mind in meditating upon the mercy of Sri Krishna. Text number 20. Without any material attachment, with senses fully controlled, remaining enthusiastic and satisfied in realization of the Supreme Lord and his own self, the saintly person should travel about the earth alone, having equal vision. Everywhere he should be steady on the spiritual platform. So here Krishna is saying that if we are too much attached to material sense gratification, we cannot be steady in the process of chanting Hare Krishna or doing anything steadily, what to speak of spiritual life. One should take shelter of devotional service to Lord Krishna 24 hours a day, for by such service one remains within the scope of spiritual reality. By chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord along with the Lord's glories and pastimes, one naturally drifts away from the field of material sense gratification. Good association with Lord Krishna and his devotees automatically vanquishes useless material association, and one is able to carry out the Vedic injunction meant to lift the conditioned soul out of the material field of repeated birth and death and onto the liberated platform of Krishna consciousness. Srila Rupa Goswami in Upadesh Smrita, there's a very wonderful verse, text number 4. He says there, offering gifts in charity, accepting gifts in charity in gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasadam and offering prasadam are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. So this is what is defined as association of devotees. In association of devotees, we offer gifts in charity and accept gifts in charity also. When we meet, we talk, we reveal our mind in confidence, inquire confidentially, and accepting prasadam and offering prasadam. These are the 6 symptoms of love shared by devotees with one another. To associate with the Lord's devotee, actually remaining insulated from contaminations of material life. By pure association, one gradually understands the name, form, quality, association, pastime and devotional service of Lord Krishna, and thus even in this lifetime one can become a resident of the spiritual world. No material contamination, no useless discussion, fully engaged 24 hours a day in the loving service of the Lord. One develops equal vision, samadarshina, situated in his constitutional position, enjoying the mellows of loving devotional service, carrying out the mission of the Lord on earth, one who enjoys life within the eternal potency of the Lord. Remaining constantly attracted to the Supreme Lord and his devotee, fully satisfied by constant engagement in devotional service, one cannot possibly develop exalted quality mentioned here without becoming an unalloyed devotee of Lord Krishna. By seriously taking to Krishna consciousness, one can realize Lord Krishna is the only true object of worship for those desiring to experience unlimited beauty and pleasure. Text number 21. Dwelling in a safe and solitary place, his mind purified by constant thought of me, the sages should concentrate on the soul alone, realizing it to be non-different from me. So here Krishna is saying that one who is engaged exclusively in devotional service of Lord Krishna in one of the 5 principal relationships is to be known as a pure Vaishnava. Because of his advanced stage of love of Godhead, a pure devotee is able to constantly chant the glories of the Lord without material hindrance. He is not interested in anything except Lord Krishna and never considers himself to be qualitatively different from the Lord. One should seriously contemplate one's identity as a small particle of the consciousness, not different from the Supreme Consciousness, Lord Krishna. Thus, one should remain steady in Krishna consciousness. Text number 22. By steady knowledge, a sage should clearly ascertain the nature of the soul's bondage and liberation. Bondage occurs when the senses are deviated to sense gratification, and complete control of the senses constitute liberation. So Krishna is saying here, by carefully understanding one's eternal nature, one will not again be bound up in the shackles of material energy. And by constant engagement in the service of the Absolute Truth, one is liberated. Then the flickering material senses can no longer drag one into the false consciousness of being a material enjoyer. Such steady senses control gives one relief from the harassment of material sense gratification. So this is actually a very, very good advice, Srila Prabhupada has repeatedly said many times, if you consider yourself to be a Krishna devotee, you must read Srila Prabhupada's books. And reading Srila Prabhupada's book here means that you must read to understand, read and to contemplate, not simply read for the sake of saying, yes, I have read, but when anybody asks you, have you understand what you've read? You say, don't know, I don't understand anything. That is not called reading. So Srila Prabhupada has told us many times, we must read his book. We must read and understand what he is saying, and then not only just accept what he says in his book blindly. No, that is not encouraged. Srila Prabhupada has said many times, you must read, you must understand, and then you must contemplate, you must think for your own self. You must use your own intelligence and ask yourself, is this right? How does this relate to me? So by doing this, what happens is you internalize the principles that Krishna talk about. These principles that Krishna talk about are principles of liberation and freedom. So once it's internalized within you, what happens is you begin to be more and more purified, and you begin to see what Krishna talks about in reality around you. Text number 23. Therefore, completely controlling the 5 senses and the mind by Krishna consciousness, a sage, having experienced spiritual bliss within the self, should live detached from insignificant material sense gratification. Text number 24. The sage should travel in sanctified places, by flowing rivers and within the solitude of mountain and forest. He should enter the city, town and pasturing grounds and approach ordinary working men only to beg his bare necessities. So Krishna here is saying those who are preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world are understood to be liberated souls, and therefore they constantly approach the materialistic living entity to engage them in the devotional service of Lord Krishna. However, even such preachers should strictly avoid contact with materialistic world when not actually necessary for advancing the mission of Krishna consciousness. The injunction is that one should not deal unnecessarily with materialistic people and be influenced by them. Text number 25. One in the Vanaprastha order of life should always practice taking charity from others, for one is thereby freed from illusion and quickly become perfect in spiritual life. Indeed, one who subsists on food grains obtained in such a humble manner purifies his existence. So in the purport, there is a very nice narration of Srila Prabhupada himself. Srila Prabhupada said that once he remembered entering Krishna conscious society as an arrogant university student and being quickly humbled by the process of begging on the street on behalf of Krishna. This process is not theoretical but actually purifies one's existence by forcing one to offer respect to all others. Unless one offers respect to others, one's begging will be fruitless. Only by begging, one will not often eat very sumptuously. This is good, because when the tongue is controlled, the other senses are quickly pacified. Text number 26. One should never see as ultimate reality those material things which obviously will perish. With consciousness freed from material attachment, one should retire from all activities meant for material progress in this life and the next. So, one may doubt how a gentleman can retire from family life and live as a beggar, eating meager foodstuff. The Lord here responds by saying that sumptuous and palatable food, along with all other material objects, such as body itself, should never be seen as ultimate reality, since they are obviously perishable items. One should retire from material programs destined to enhance the quality of one's illusion only, both in this life and in the next. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also says, for that which is temporary, there is no endurance, and for that which is eternal, there is no destruction. Text number 27. One should logically consider the universe, which is situated within the Lord, and one's own material body, which is composed of mind, speech, and life air, to be ultimately product of the Lord's illusory energy. Thus situated in the self, one should give up one's faith in these things and should never again make them the object of one's meditation. So this is actually very, very powerful advice. Simply because every conditioned soul in this material world, they consider their object of personal sense gratification and therefore consider their material body to be his actual identity. This is the beginning of illusion. Looking at things from the eternal point of view, that means looking at things from the point of view of the eternal soul, this world is simply an illusion. The material energy of the Lord is devoid of consciousness and thus cannot be the basis of actual happiness. The Supreme Lord himself is the only absolute conscious entity. He is absolutely self-sufficient, standing alone as Vishnu, the personality of Godhead. Only Vishnu and not the insignificant working of material nature can give us the actual perfection of life. The actual reality is that we are eternally related to Krishna as an eternal spirit soul, not this material body. Text number 28. This one is a very nice verse. This one gives you a glimpse into the glory of devotional service. Please listen carefully. A learned transcendentalist dedicated to the cultivation of knowledge and thus detached from external objects, or my devotees who is detached even from desire for liberation, both neglect those duties based on eternal rituals or paraphernalia. Thus their conduct is beyond the range of rules and regulations. So this verse here is describing the Paramahamsa stage of life, in which there is no further need for rituals, external paraphernalia or rules and regulations. A completely realized Jnani Yogi pursuing liberation, or beyond that a perfect devotee of the Lord who does not desire even liberation, has no further desire for material engagement. When one completely purifies the mind, there is no possibility of sinful behavior. Rules and regulations are meant for guiding those who have a tendency to act in an ignorant or for personal gratification. But one who is perfect in spiritual consciousness can move freely, as described here by the Lord. A pure devotee of the Lord desires nothing except for the service of the Lord. He automatically fulfills the purpose of all negative and positive injunctions, which is to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. One should not, however, artificially imitate the exalted position of a Paramahamsa devotee, for such imitation will quickly ruin one's spiritual career. So imitation is highly discouraged. As long as we are still learning, we should always act under the authority of a bonafied spiritual master. Text number 29. Although most wise, the Paramahamsas should enjoy life like a child, oblivious to honor and dishonor. Although most expert, he should behave like a stunted, incompetent person. Although most learned, he should speak like an insane person. And although a scholar learned in Vedic regulation, he should behave like in an unrestricted manner. So here, a Paramahamsa sannyasi, fearing that his mind may be deviated by the treacherous prestige that people sometimes offer to perfectly self-realized person, conceal his position as described in this verse. A self-realized person does not try to please the masses of people, nor does he desire social prestige, since the mission of his life is to remain detached from material world and to always please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So a very good example of this is Gorakishore Das Babaji. If you know his story, he is actually very highly exalted, and he was very much harassed by materialistic people because of his purity. So he used to do these kind of things. He used to do, he used to behave like a madman, so that they will just leave him alone. Text number 30. A devotee should never engage in the fruitive rituals mentioned in Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, nor should he become atheistic, acting or speaking in opposition to Vedic injunction. Similarly, he should never speak like a mere logician or skeptic or take any side whatsoever in useless argument. So here Srila Jiva Goswami warns us in this regard that a devotee should not read atheistic literatures, even with the purpose of refining arguments against atheism. Such literature should be entirely avoided. The above mentioned prohibited activities are so detrimental to the advancement of Krishna consciousness that they should not be adopted even as a superficial show. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave the same advice. He says there once, he says, I think, what was the verse? Mayavadi Bhasha Sunile Sarvaknash. He says, if you listen to the atheistic ideas of these Mayavadis, your life will be a disaster. So we should do our very best to avoid even coming across books that are atheistic in nature. And the best advice for us to follow is to read Srila Prabhupada's books. All you need to know is there in Srila Prabhupada's books. Text number 31. A saintly person should never let others frighten or disturb him, and similarly should never frighten or disturb other people. He should tolerate the insults of others and should never himself belittle anyone. He should never create hostility with anyone for the sake of the material body, for he would thus be no longer better than an animal. So here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, and Trinad api sunichana tarur api sahisuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind. Thinking oneself lower than a straw on the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and one should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So a Vaishnava should never disturb any other living entity with his body, mind or word. He should always be tolerant and never belittle others. Although a Vaishnava may act powerfully against the demon for Lord Krishna's sake, as did Arjuna, Hanuman and many other great devotees, a Vaishnava becomes very meek and humble in regard to his own reputation. Text number 32. The one Supreme Lord is situated within all material bodies and within everyone's soul. Just as the moon is reflected in innumerable reservoirs of water, the Supreme Lord, although one, is present within everyone. Thus, every material body is ultimately composed of the energy of the Supreme Lord. So Krishna here is saying that all material bodies are composed of the same material nature, which is ultimately the potency of the one Supreme Lord. Therefore, one cannot justify feeling of hostility towards any living entity. In carrying out the Lord's mission on earth, the bonafied representative of God never becomes envious or hostile towards anyone, even when chastised by those who flagrantly violate the laws of God. Every living being is ultimately the Son of God, and God is present within everyone's body. Therefore, a saintly person should be very careful even when dealing with the most insignificant person or creature. Text number 33. If at times one does not obtain proper food, one should not be depressed. And when one obtains sumptuous food, one should not rejoice. Being fixed in determination, one should understand both situations to be under the control of God. Text number 34. If required, one should endeavor to get sufficient foodstuff, because it is always necessary and proper to maintain one's health. When the senses, mind and life are fit, one can contemplate spiritual truth, and by understanding the truth, one is liberated. So on the other hand, extravagant consumption of food is a great impediment for spiritual advancement and should be given up. Only to keep oneself fit for spiritual advancement, one should eat what is required to maintain body and soul together. If one collects more than necessary, the surplus becomes a heavy weight that drags one down to the material platform. Text number 35. A sage should accept food, clothing and bedding, be they of excellent or inferior quality, that comes of his own accord. Text number 36. Just as I, the Supreme Lord, execute regulative duties by my own free will, similarly one who has realized knowledge of me should maintain general cleanliness, purify his hands with water, take bath and execute other regulative duties, not by force but by his own free will. So here, the Lord Krishna, he descends to the material world. He generally observes the Vedic regulative duties to set a proper example for mankind. Just like Lord Rama, he is known as Maryada Purusham Avatar. A self-realized soul is a servant of Lord Krishna and not of the rules and regulation. One who is advanced in loving devotional service to Lord Krishna spontaneously moves according to the will of the Supreme. This verse and other similar statements in the Vedic literature should not be ignorantly misinterpreted to justify immoral, whimsical behavior. Lord Krishna is discussing the Paramahamsa stage of life, and those who are attached to the material body have nothing to do with Paramahamsa stage, and should they exploit its unique privilege and status. So Krishna here is giving warning. Yes, he says here, he's discussing all the characteristics of a very advanced devotee. We should not imitate them for our own glorification. Text number 37. A self-realized soul no longer sees anything as separate from me, for his realized knowledge of me has destroyed such illusion. Since the material body and mind were previously accustomed to this kind of perception, it may sometime appear to reoccur, but at the time of death, the self-realized soul achieves opulence equal to mine. So, a self-realized soul may sometime appear to accept or reject certain conditions or objects within this world. Such accepting and rejecting appears like duality upon something other than Krishna, does not change the liberated status of a self-realized soul, who at the time of death achieves the same opulence as Lord Sri Krishna. The function of illusion is to separate one from Lord Krishna, but the brief and occasional appearance of dualities in the behavior or mentality of a pure devotee never separates him from the Lord. It does not constitute actual illusion, for it lacks the essential function of illusion, namely the separation of one from Lord Krishna. So sometimes when we see saintly person, they behave and they think almost exactly like us, and we make the mistake of thinking they are not advanced, they are just like us. But actually, the purpose of illusion is to separate us from Krishna, make us forget Krishna. So the one quality that you can see in a pure devotee is that no matter what happens, they always remember Krishna, they always say Krishna, they always think of Krishna, they always thinking, how can I serve Krishna at every moment? So we should be vigilant, whenever we are around devotees, we should not even in our mind consider them to be fallen in any way. Text number 38. One who is detached from sense gratification, knowing its result to be miserable, and who desires spiritual perfection, but who has not seriously analyzed the process for obtaining me, should approach a bonafied and learned spiritual master. Krishna says the same thing also in chapter 4, text 34. So in the previous verse, Lord Krishna describes the duty of one who has developed perfect knowledge. Now Lord Krishna discusses the situation of one who, desiring self-realization, has become detached from material life but lack perfect knowledge of Krishna consciousness. One who is seriously inclined towards spiritual perfection should not hesitate to adopt the regulated discipline necessary for achieving the highest perfection of life. And such discipline comes from a bonafied spiritual master. For those aspiring to advance in spiritual life, all you need to do is just get any book from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada tells in his books what one must do to get started in spiritual life. Text number 39. Until a devotee has clearly realized spiritual knowledge, he should continue with great faith and respect and without envy to render personal service to Guru, who is non-different from me. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Guru Astakam, he says, Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasado. One receives the mercy of the Supreme Lord through the mercy of a bonafied spiritual master. A devotee who has been blessed by his Guru with spiritual knowledge becomes qualified to directly engage in the mission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada has always emphasized the service to the spiritual master in separation, pushing on the movement of the Guru is the highest form of devotional service. One who has not clearly realized the teaching of his spiritual master should remain very close to his Guru to avoid falling down into illusion. But one who has acquired realized knowledge by the mercy of his spiritual master may expand the spiritual master's mission by traveling around the world to preach Krishna consciousness. Text 40 and 41. One who has not controlled the 6 forms of illusion, which is lust, anger, greed, excitement, false pride, and intoxication, whose intelligence, the leader of the senses, is extremely attached to material things, who is bereft of knowledge and detachment, who adopts the sannyas order of life to make a living, who denies the worshipable demigods, his own self and the Supreme Lord within himself, thus ruining all religious principles, and who is still infected by material contamination, is deviated and lost both in this life and in the next. So Sri Krishna here is giving a warning for those who are pretending to be sannyasi devotees. Lord Krishna here condemns bogus personalities who adopt the sannyas order of life for sense gratification while still maintaining all the symptoms of gross illusion. A false show of sannyas is never accepted by intelligent followers of Vedic principles. So-called sannyasis who ruin all Vedic religious principles sometimes become famous among foolish persons, but they are simply cheating themselves and their followers. These charlatans, these cheaters sannyasis are never actually engaged in the loving devotional service of Lord Krishna. Text number 42. The main religious duty of a sannyasi are equanimity and non-violence, whereas for the vanaprasthas, austerity and philosophical understanding of the difference between the body and soul are prominent. The main duty of a householder is to give shelter to all living entities and perform sacrifice. and the brahmachari is mainly engaged in serving the spiritual master. Text number 43. A householder may approach his wife for sex only at the time prescribed for begetting children. Otherwise, the householder should practice celibacy, austerity, cleanliness of mind and body, satisfaction in his natural position, and friendship towards all living entities. Worship of me is to be practiced by all human beings, regardless of social or occupational divisions. So Krishna is saying here, those in the householder ashrama are not authorized to enjoy life like pigs and dogs, freely exercising their sexual potency. A religious householder should approach his wife at the prescribed time and place and beget a saintly child for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, it is specifically mentioned here that a householder must practice celibacy along with all of the other members of advanced human civilization. So only in the Grihastha ashram there is some license for sense gratification, namely sex. But even this also is so restricted, simply because too much indulgence in sense gratification will cause unnecessary difficulty in one's life, and it doesn't give you one perfection in life. At the end of life, if one is addicted to sense gratification, you have to go through the process of vanaprastha, which you have just heard is very, very troublesome. Text number 44. One who worships me by his prescribed duty, having no other object of worship, and who remains conscious of me as present in all living entities, achieve unflinching devotional service unto me. So it is clearly explained in this verse that loving devotional service unto Lord Krishna is the ultimate goal of the entire varnasrama system, which the Lord has been elaborately explained. In any social or occupational division of human society, one must be a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and worship Him alone. The bonafied spiritual master is the representative of Lord Krishna, and worship of the Acharya goes directly to the lotus feet of the Lord. This one is very important to understand. Although ordinary householders are sometimes ordered by Vedic injunction to worship particular demigods or forefathers, one should remember that Lord Krishna is within all living entities. As stated here, the pure devotees of the Lord worship the Lord alone, and those who cannot come to the standard of pure devotional service should at least meditate upon the personality of Godhead within the demigods and all other living entities, understanding that all religious processes are ultimately meant for the pleasure of the Lord. Text number 45. My dear Uddhava, I am the Supreme Lord of all worlds, and I create and destroy this universe, being its ultimate cause. I am thus the absolute truth, and one who worships me with unfailing devotional service come to me. So Sri Krishna here, actually he is saying that he is the creator of this material world. But in Srimad Bhagavatam, you will see in Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 11, Krishna says he appears in three features, that is Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. Sri Krishna is the source of everything. Lord Krishna absorbs the impersonal philosophy into the ray of his bodies, appearing before the perfect yogi as the Lord of the heart, and ultimately brings his pure devotee back home, back to Godhead for eternal life of bliss and knowledge. So this one you have to keep in mind. No? He will appear towards his devotee according to how they perceive him. So if you perceive him to be impersonal Brahman, then he will be the source of everything, absorbing the impersonal philosophy into the ray of his body. If you see him as the localized Paramatma, he appears before the perfect yogi as the Lord of the heart. And if you see him as Sakshat Sri Bhagavan, Lord Sri Krishna, three bending form with a peacock feather and a flute in his hand, he will appear to bring his pure devotees back home, back to Godhead for eternal life of bliss and knowledge. Text number 46. Thus, one who has purified his existence by execution of these prescribed duties, who fully understand my supreme position, and who is endowed with scriptural and realized knowledge, very soon achieve me. Text number 47. Those who are followers of this varnasrama system accept religious principles according to authorized tradition of proper conduct. When such varnasrama duties are dedicated to me in loving service, they award the supreme perfection of life. So according to the varnasrama system, the members of different orders and status of life have many traditional duties, such as worshipping the forefathers to save them from possible sinful reaction. All such Vedic rituals, sacrifices, austerity and so on and so forth should be offered to the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. They then become the transcendental means for going back home, back to Godhead. In other words, Krishna consciousness or loving service to Lord Sri Krishna is the sum and substance of progressive human life. Text number 48. My dear saintly Uddhava, I have now described to you, just as you inquired, the means by which my devotees perfectly engage in my prescribed duties. Come back to me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here we can see that the ultimate purpose and the ultimate perfection of life is to simply perform loving devotional service to Lord Sri Krishna. Without doing that, any process that you take up, like vanaprastha, sannyasa, brahmachari, grihastha or whatever, it becomes srama evahi kevalam, it becomes useless waste of time. So perfection in life starts with chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. Radhe